So today we're going to talk about cutting large pieces. And large pieces are going to be used for borders on your quilts. They're long, they're bigger than your ruler. Quilt as you go blocks often can be big and larger than your ruler. And also things for purses and totes. So we're going to get into cutting, and we're going to talk about just a couple things. I'm going to start, this is just a 1 yard piece, kind of a standard shape, obviously. And then this is one of our skinny yards. Cheryl talked about skinny yards last week, and what a skinny yard is we cut 2 yards of fabric off the bolt, and then we cut it on the fold. So you end up with a piece that's approximately 21 by 2 yards long. And so it's a big, long piece of fabric. And these are great for borders. So I'm going to have Cheryl zoom in on the camera now, or tip it forward so you can see my cutting mat. And that's where you're going to start. So we'll get lined up here for just a second. And that looks great. All right. So I have a couple tools with me. I have my cutting mat, I have my rotary cutter, and I have a scissors. I also have a couple rulers that we'll talk about in a few minutes. My favorite method for cutting borders is to cut them long instead of cutting crosswise and piecing. It often requires a little bit more fabric, but it also means your borders are never pieced. So if I have a really pretty floral border with big flowers in it, I don't have to cut those in half, miter those corners, and connect strips. A good kind of rule of measure, if you're doing a queen size quilt, it's like, oh, how much fabric do I need if I do that? For a queen size quilt, a 3 yard piece is 108 inches long, and I can get many wide strips out of that. If I want an 8-inch border, I can get 2 strips on this side, on a regular 3 yard piece, sorry. I can get 4 8-inch, excuse me, I can get 4 8-inch strips to make my long borders, and then they're not pieced. If I'm doing narrower borders, say 6 or 6.5 inches, I have a fair bit left. I can actually cut my binding strips lengthwise, so I don't have to do as much piecing as well. So how do I do that? For me, and a lot of people, this makes them gasp, I tear the fabric. It tears on straight of grain, and it tears very easily if you do it properly. You want to tear just a little bit at a time. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to just start here. And I would turn it this way. And I would take my ruler. And I would measure, say I want a 6.5 inch border. And I'm going to measure 6.5 inches. And then I'm just going to snip my fabric at 6.5 inches. So I just started my tear. And then I'm real gently, oh, I know that sound just makes you nervous, but just tear slowly. And I'm going to tear that whole length. And I didn't iron this before I started. Had I ironed, there were a couple little places where it looks like, oh, that pulled a little bit. That doesn't happen if you're ironed. And then the edge, yep, it's a little bit, just a little bit frayed, but still well within your 1/4 inch. So what I do next is I take my iron and my best press and I press that whole piece. And then I have a beautiful straight long piece for any of my borders or long pieces that I want to cut. Works really nice. I also do this for purse handles or tote bag handles. It gets you a very long straight piece. If you're too nervous to cut and tear, the other thing that you can do is use the edge of the selvage as a straight edge measure. And I would press this, and I would grab my ruler and I would lay it right along the edge of my selvage. Again, if this is pressed, it's nice and straight. I'm going to just take my cutter, and I'm going to just move this back, and I'm going to keep sliding up, and I'm going to cut that entire selvage off nice and straight. While I'm doing that, I usually don't start right where I ended my cut. I move back just a few inches so that I've got a nice line up here with what I've already cut and the upcoming border. So I keep going. And normally I would do this with a 24-inch ruler, but I wanted to be able to be on camera pretty easily. And I would just keep cutting. That gives me a straight edge on this side. And then I'm going to turn it around. So my cutter's on the right side for me. And I'm going to take my 6.5-inch mark on my ruler. And I'm going to line that up along the edge of the fabric. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut here. That leaves me with a nice straight edge for my next piece. I cut that strip, and then I move over, cut the next strip, and so forth. So that's the easiest way to cut big, long pieces. Again, I like the tear method because it tears everything on straight of grain. I use the method to cut the selvage off. If I have a print, sometimes if you have a directional print or something that's printed as kind of a plaid or a straight line, it isn't always printed perfectly straight on the fabric. And then I typically will use a line in the fabric to line up my edge. So it gives me the visual of being straight, even though it might be off grain by just a scooch. I don't like to do that on my borders, but if I'm doing pieces for purse handles, or larger pieces that are going to be in the body of a bag or a quilt as you go project, that works out pretty well. And from there, we're going to talk about just using a regular yard of fabric. This is just 1 yard on the fold. My selvage is here. What do I do if I have to cut big pieces? Say I'm doing a quilt as you go project and I need a piece that's 18 inches square or 20 inches square. How to best do that? A lot of people cut on their mat. That's okay, not quite as accurate, but you can actually trim off your selvage, lay it on your mat, count all your squares, be sure that things don't shift and slide. If I'm doing that, I keep a good sized ruler in place so nothing slides while I'm counting my squares. That's not my favorite method. I find that I tend to bump and move things a little bit. So I like to use my rulers and keep the fabric under my ruler, my good piece, and I'm cutting here. Things don't slide on me. So the first thing that I'm going to do is use a big square up ruler. And when I say square up ruler, that was what I was using here. It's marked with different numbers all the way around. They come in all different sizes. The biggest one is my personal favorite. Most of you who know me know that. This ruler is a 20.5-inch square, 20.5 inches all the way around. This I use a lot if I'm doing quilt as you go and I want big squares, things like the big flower blocks. I will use this 20.5-inch square as my back piece for my quilt as you go. And then I'll cut an 18 or 19-inch square for, 17 or 18-inch square for my center, depending on how wide I want my borders. We did a full video on quilt as you go. There's more detail on cutting for that in that video. But here I'm going to talk about just using a square up ruler for large pieces. So on a square up ruler, I'm going to hold this, and we get a good reflection of the light up on top. So here is the numbering on your square up ruler. If you are right-handed, there's one corner on the ruler that shows a 1 and a 1 in the numbering. All the other corners are different. They show different numbers. You don't have your 1 and your 1. If you are right-handed, you want the 1, 1 in your upper right corner. If you are left-handed, it's going to be in your upper left corner. And what that does is allow me to measure both across and down on whatever piece I'm cutting. And so I'm going to open this piece up and turn my mat this way because I'm going to be making a 20.5-inch cut and this mat is only 18. I'm going to lay my ruler right on top here and I'm going to find my 1, 1 corner and I'm putting that in. You guys have to look at me in reverse, but I'm right-handed. This is my 1, 1. I want to cut 18 this way, or I'm sorry, we'll cut the size of the ruler. We'll do a 20.5-inch square first. So I'm going to line this edge up right along my selvage. And I'm going to go 20.5 this way and 20.5 this way. So I'm going to just take this off. And my mat's not quite big enough. I have to be sure that I don't cut across too far. I'm going to cut across till about the edge of my mat. And then I'm going to just scoot this over a little bit. And I'm just going to continue that seam. And I'm lining up the edge of my ruler with the top edge. I'm still on camera here. So I've got my corner here is lined up with this edge, nice and straight. And across here, now I just need to go to this end of my mat. And I've still got mat underneath, so I can come this way. And it's a little bit awkward. Works well if you have a large mat. I didn't bring up a large mat because I wanted to show you that you can do it on a smaller mat. And so here I am. I now have, these corners are clean already, meaning I've already cut them to size. And now I can, again, line up my ruler along the edges here and here. And I'm off my mat again. Slide up a little bit and slide over so I can do that in one cut. Again, it looks a little bit awkward. It is until you're used to it. And it's also easier when you're not doing it on camera. Okay, so I'm nice and even here and here. Remember the old adage, check twice, cut once. So I'm going to cut here and across here. And that gives me a 20.5-inch square. Okay? What happens if I don't have one of those big giant rulers? Well, you can always go to the sewing basket and buy a big giant ruler. But if you've got smaller rulers, you can always use 2 rulers to make a cut. So I am going to put my big ruler away, and I'm going to pretend that I have probably what you have, a 12.5-inch and a 24-inch. A lot of you will have a 6 by 24. This happens to be 8.5 by 24. This is a great size ruler. It allows you to cut 8.5-inch squares with this ruler, lets you do long border pieces really easily. But if I want to do a 20.5-inch square with these 2 rulers, again, I'm going to turn my mat here. If we were on a big mat, it would be easier for you. Most of you have big mats at home, but if you don't, you can do it on this. This seam I would have pressed out, and I want 20.5 inches. And so I have to measure, sorry, need to turn it around for me. I was doing it in your direction, and that is not going to be the easiest thing. So I'm going to grab this, and I'm going to, again, chop off that selvage edge. You can't see it, but I have my line of dots where my selvage is. So I'm going to cut off my selvage. And now I want to cut at 20.5 inches, both height and length. I'm first going to turn this way. This is my straight edge. And I'm going to turn here. And again, flipping my mat because I want 20.5 inches. Okay. And I am going to got to think for just one second. Coming from this edge. Sorry, I want to be cutting this way. Looks like chaos, doesn't it? It really isn't. Okay. So I'm going to have my straight edge here, and I want 20.5 inches. So this ruler is 8.5 inches wide. And so I need, check my math, 8.5 and 12 is, Cheryl, my math queen, is back here too. So I need 12 inches. So this piece is my straight cut. I'm going to cut along this edge. This is 8.5, and I'm lining this ruler up at 12 inches. Okay. And then this ruler, this is already my straight cut. And so this ruler is now at 20.5 inches. All right. And so there's my piece. I would keep cutting that, and then I'll pull it up a little bit. I can just extend that seam, and I can do that with one ruler. I've got a long seam here already, so I can just line my ruler up along that edge. Okay, so now I've got this is 20.5 wide. This side we had already cleaned up, and now I just have to do my 20.5 on this side. Right? And again, I'm going to line up my 12 inches on my ruler, line up this edge, butt this ruler to it, and cut that edge. Slide this up and finish that cut. And that will give me my 20.5 inch square. The two ruler method works well. You have to play with it a little bit to get used to the process, but it really works well. If I want for my purse, say I'm going to make a big piece, and I'm going to take a chunk of this one here. Say I need to make an 18 by 30 inch piece. Okay? I can measure my 30 inches by, again, I'm off the wrong side here, I'm trying to make it so you guys can see, and that really isn't a good plan. Okay? If I want, I'm going to say 20, what do I have here? I got to be sure my rulers are big enough. I can go this way. I've got, this is a 24 inch piece. I can slide this over, and if I want another, say 24, another 10 inches, I'm going to have my 12.5, another 10 inches gets me 20.5, my brain is, so I'm going to go, I'm counting total inches from here off this edge. So I'm going to do the math real easy and say I want 22 inches. So I have 22.5.
There you go.
There you go. I got 12.5, and now I need to add to that my 10.5. Got my 10.5, and here's my cut. So I have a long piece. If I want 30 inches, I'm measuring this distance, these two rulers added together. That gets you my straight seam. So I can cut very, very long pieces by butting the two rulers together and adding the length. So a lot of tote bags, you need like a 15 by 28 inch piece. It's an easy way to do it. The other thing you can do, you can always fold your fabric in half. And if I need a 24 inch piece, I can take my ruler, press this all nice, get that seam nice and straight. And if I need 24 inches, I'm going to use my square up ruler, my 1 up in this corner. I'm going to go over to 12 inches and cut this. Let's see if I can get it this way too. Okay, remember, don't cut off the fold. And now I have a 12 by 24 inch piece. So it works well. It's more accurate than cutting off your mat. If you're comfortable, cut off your mat, especially with purses. They're a little bit more forgiving. You've got a little more seam allowance. In quilting, you have that issue of I want every point to match perfectly. So a more accurate cut is a better finished product for you. So I hope that wasn't as convoluted as it felt from this end, but it gives you the concept of cutting with two rulers. And we look forward to seeing you in the shop. Lots and lots of new fabric coming in, a few things last week and a lot anticipated for the next couple weeks. We really appreciate your time. And if you would, leave a comment and tell me your favorite tip. If you've got any suggestions, please go ahead and post those as well. If you like our videos, you can give us a thumbs up on YouTube. That always helps us. And we sure appreciate your following along with us. Thanks and have a great month. Bye-bye.